Hey there, Village Church. Vicki Basinger here. I'm the communications manager, and I'm sitting with Pastor Michael Fueling, and we are going through some sermon Q&As for the sermon series in June 2021 called Practical Evangelism for an Ambivalent World. And today we are talking about the spiritual gift of evangelism. What is it?
So that's a great question. There's actually a little bit of debate on this, but let's break through some of the chaos of this. And so here's what we know. We know that the Bible talks about spiritual gifts. A spiritual gift is something, it's a ministry that God calls you to. And you know you have a spiritual gift because when you do this thing, it bears spiritual fruit. Paul says the Spirit manifests himself when you do these things. It's a manifestation of the Spirit. And so how do I know that I have a gift of teaching or a gift of evangelism or a gift of leadership? Well, spiritual fruit is born out of that. So we follow the fruit, we look for fruit. And what's interesting is that evangelism does not show up in most of the lists of spiritual gift, but the list in the New Testament, there's a few of them. They all just kind of pick different gifts. There's not like one total list of spiritual gifts. Some gifts are actually offices in the church. So Paul in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11, he talks about in the church that God has given apostles, which is an office, but Paul also calls it a gift. You have the prophets, which is an office, but it's a gift. You have shepherds and teachers, which is an office, but teaching is a gift. You know what I'm saying? And so there's an interesting, the confusion comes around, is it an office or is it a gift? And it seems that like evangelist is both. Evangelist is an actual position in the church. Philip was an evangelist, right? That's what it's called. But it also seems to be a gift as well. So if you're an evangelist, you have the ability, the calling to go preach the gospel, probably to places that have never heard it. But how do I know I have the gift of evangelism? Well, when I preach, people trust in Christ. You know what I mean? Like,
seems pretty.
God says to Paul, well, go start churches. Well, how do I know that I'm called to go start churches? Well, because churches start where I go to places. I preach the gospel, people get saved, and then churches are birthed. You know, like, so you follow the fruit on this stuff. And so what is an evangelist? There's two sides of the coin here. Number one, evangelist is actually a ministry in a church, sort of like an office, sort of like a position where you're called to go do these things. Think of like Billy Graham or Luis Palau, right? These are men that are called by God to evangelize and bring the gospel. One could be an evangelist. Those are the men I was thinking of. You do find throughout history that it seems to be more men who are evangelists. I don't know why, anecdotally, that just seems to be what happens. But then you have people who may not be called to go like to unchurched people groups, but they have the gift of evangelism. And so how do I know I have the gift? People come to Christ a lot around me. There are some people, like they'll just get saved and they'll tell their friends about Jesus and then their friends will believe. Whereas like there'll be people who they're walking with the Lord for years and like they preach the gospel and nobody gets saved. I'll use an example. Do you know how many times in a sermon I've preached the gospel? Thousands.
Infinite number. Yes.
Unending. And we see people come to Christ, not in droves. Like, let's be honest. Like, remember Bill Hybels, right? He seemed to have a gift of evangelism. The dude would just get up and talk and people would give their life to Christ. It was nuts. And many of those conversions endured. So like, well, what God gave that guy and a whole bunch of other people these unusual ability to preach the gospel and people respond. And so like, for example, when I teach, I don't know why, I remember when I was 19, I was preaching this 20, I was preaching my first sermon. It was so bad. So bad. Objectively the worst.
Is there video footage of this?
No, I have tapes though, which nobody will ever hear. And so I had somebody come up to me afterwards. A few comments were pretty funny, but like people kept coming to me like, you need to keep doing this. This is good. And again, so I'd go back and listen to the tape and be like, no, this is atrocious. I was fumbling all over myself. My words weren't clear, but the Spirit made himself known, worked in that despite my lack of skill. And the Spirit bore fruit when I would teach at such a young age. And I knew that God was pushing me in that direction because I could follow the fruit and people confirmed it, said, keep doing that. It's the same with the gift of evangelism. Now, here's my problem. Ready? A little controversial.
I'm ready.
Most of the people that I know that have the gift of evangelism cannot identify anybody in their life who's come to Christ in the last 5 years.
Interesting.
Don't know why. What I found is that often people who have the gift of evangelism are actually men who love apologetics.
Interesting.
So
why do you think that is?
put that in your theological pipe and smoke it.
I was gonna...
Yeah. D.A. Carson said that at Moody Bible Institute.
Oh, so it's okay.
Yeah, so it's totally okay. I figured that was he's talking about how every Muslim he's known that's come to faith in Christ has come to faith because Jesus visited them in a dream, and he says, "Put that in your theological pipe and smoke it." And the crowd went nuts.
That's incredible.
Laughed hysterically.
That's
but anyways,
so funny.
that seems to be a trend. So, what is the gift of evangelism? It's a calling in your life to preach the gospel, and you know you have it because
you can
God
see
bears
the
fruit.
fruit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, what if you don't have the gift? Paul says to Timothy's not an evangelist. He says, do the work of an evangelist.
Yeah.
So are you off the hook, Vicky?
Of course not.
No, because you're a Christian. So do the work of an evangelist. This is what most people need to do. You need to do the work of an evangelist.
Yeah.
We need to share the gospel. But
Yeah.
evangelists are trippy because, man, they just, whatever they do, people come to Christ. And I'm like, wow,
That is incredible.
nuts.
Yes.
So do you know any evangelists?
I know one, and it's absolutely incredible. And sometimes feels like it's really unfair because, you know, you do the work of an evangelist. We are called to do the work of an evangelist. And sometimes we don't see anyone, or maybe like one or two here and there.
Yep.
And this guy just like one after another after another.
Yep.
It's unbelievable. And it's wonderful, right? We are praying for as many who hear it.
I'm like a little
come to
jealous.
gospel, right? Yes. Is that wrong?
Yep.
But yeah, it is wonderful. You know, the gift of evangelism, you know, truly is an incredible, you know, gift from the Lord. And you know, those of us who don't have it, we just keep on keeping on.
Yep. We do the work of an evangelist. That is our job.
Yep, for sure. Well, thanks for listening in Village Church. Tune in next time where we'll be answering a few more questions on Sermon Q&A. We have a couple more already from this sermon series that we'd love for you to check out.